Hello, welcome back to Newbie Debate. This is the first episode in the Need to Know series. So, we're going to be going over basically kind of what debate is and what your expectations should be going into your first tournament. So, in policy debate, there is an affirmative team and a negative team. The affirmative team, in a fundamental sense, is saying yes to the resolutional statement, which is this thing right here. We get one of these each year. I don't know why the thing's doing that, but you get the gist. It's this thing. Okay, that's fine. We get one of these each year from the National Speech and Debate Association. This year is about the exploration development of the Arctic. You might be watching this in the future. Maybe that's not the topic. If so, defer to what you know the topic to be from your coach, or you can access it on the NSDA website under the topics. But the affirmative team says yes to this statement, saying that we should increase exploration or development of the Arctic. And they do so by reading a plan. So, plan text here is that the United States federal government should increase its construction and deployment of nuclear powered icebreakers in the Arctic. Now, as the affirmative, what you do doesn't really matter as long as you can argue why it falls under this general umbrella. So, this team, if they were reading this icebreakers affirmative, would say that they're increasing the development probably of the Arctic. You can also probably say that it's exploration too, but they would say that they're increasing the exploration and or the exploration of the exploration or the development or the exploration and the development of the Arctic by making these. And so your job as the affirmative is to read this plan text and then give reasons why the plan would cause something that's good. And that's typically through something called an advantage. If you're debating in the DKC times, which is 5 minutes for a constructive and 3 minutes for a rebuttal, then you're probably only going to be reading one advantage in your speech. If you're debating the full 8 minutes, you probably have time for two. And so these are two different advantages. One is shipbuilding, and one is Arctic research. They make the general argument that we don't have great shipbuilding. We don't have great shipbuilding right now, and the plan causes an increase in shipbuilding, and an increase in shipbuilding causes something that's good. And then Arctic research says that we are currently not having a great amount of Arctic research, and the icebreakers are key to causing an increase in research, and research is good because in this case it prevents diseases and pandemics. So that's the affirmative team's job. They're going to read what specifically you read is if you got something like this put together. If not, you'll have to get it put together, which if you're in that boat you might want to watch the other playlist, but you'll want to read the speech that you've got pre-prepared by like a coach or an advanced teammate. You'll read this background. This background might not always be there, but if it is, you'll read the background. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union, blah blah blah. You'll read like that, and then you'll want to make sure that you're reading these things right here. So like you don't want to just start with during the Cold War. You'll say background. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union created 32 new icebreakers. You get the gist? And then when you got down after we present the following plan, or you could say plan text. The United States federal government should increase its construction and deployment of nuclear-powered icebreakers in the Arctic. The funding and enforcement is through normal means. Advantage 1 is shipbuilding. Point is, you want to read these things. This right here, obviously, because this is all background. This is written by someone. This is too, but this is specifically a part of this piece of evidence here. This is called a card. This is the tagline of the card. It is a 1 sentence long explanation of what this says. This is the author citation, and this is the full citation, the whole thing. What you read is you'll say, access to the Arctic is impossible without icebreakers, but America's fleet is small and unreliable, and the U.S. has not built a new icebreaker in decades. Peyton 25. You won't say Ben Peyton. You won't say Ben Payton 25, freelance journalist, just Payton 25, the last name and the year. And then you'll read just the highlighted parts. So let's skip to this sentence because this doesn't really help us demonstrate. The Polar Star is the only operational heavy icebreaker the Coast Guard possesses. Key there is I skipped that and the United States. I'm just reading the highlighted bits. And that's how you read when you're on the affirmative. Obviously, you're going to be reading the same way on the negative, but we're just giving you an example of what the affirmative looks like. So the 1AC, whenever you are affirmative or negative, you're either going to be the 1 or you're going to be the 2. And if you are the 1, then you are going to be reading this first affirmative constructive, which is going to be a pre-written speech. And the 2A, that's why we on this file we have all these other stuff, is there's a bunch of different things here. Now, if you were the 2A and you read all of this stuff, well, you're not going to, because it's like you're never going to be able to have time to read all of this different stuff in the 2AC, because the job of the 2AC isn't to read a pre-written speech like the 1AC, but instead is to extend the arguments that were made here. So you want to restate your general thesis of what the AF is saying, respond to the arguments that they make against the affirmative. So if they say the plan doesn't solve, you say the plan solves according to Neshua and Matthewson 22, and then you maybe like give us a general idea of what this card said, and then you respond to their specific arguments. Like they maybe read a card that says the plan doesn't solve. You tell us why this Neshua and Matthewson 22 is more correct, that the plan does solve, or why whatever evidence they read is not correct. And then you would respond to any other arguments that they made off case against the affirmative. And so your job as the 2AC is to respond to specific things rather than reading something that's pre-prepared in advance, which is a little scary, but it's not that hard whenever you get the hang of it, because realistically you just figure out what, if we have it blocked up, if we have like blocked up responses to it, like say it's one of these arguments here in this file, we can just read what we have prepared. Not this 1AR stuff or this impact defense stuff, but we'll read what we have prepared here. That'll be what we read. 2AC, Arctic Council counterplan. And if we don't, then we just need to come up with our best strategy for how to respond to things that we aren't prepared for. If it's not something we have prepared, we'll give it our best response. And then maybe in the preparation for the next tournament, we'll make sure that we have some responses to it prepared. So yeah, that's what you do on the affirmative. I don't have a negative file pulled up. We'll go ahead and do that actually. Give me just a second. We'll pull up the icebreakers case negative. So this is the icebreakers case negative. If you're on the negative, you generally want to read like maybe a disadvantage, maybe 2. Once again, if you're operating on DKC time frames, then you probably just want to read the 1 disadvantage, because you want to read a disadvantage which is about the case, but it's not about the case. Like the affirmative team, let's say they only read the first advantage, and that was, which was it specifically? Shipbuilding. So let's say they read the shipbuilding advantage. Now, this fisheries DA is about nuclear-powered icebreakers and marine ecosystems. That has nothing to do with shipbuilding. But the argument is about the creation of icebreakers. And so whilst this isn't talking about what the case is talking about, it's something that happens that's bad as a result of making icebreakers. And so it's an off-case argument. It's not about the case, but it links or is connected to the case in some way. So you'll want to read some sort of off-case argument like a disadvantage, and then you'll want to make arguments against the case. So we'll go up, say they read this shipbuilding advantage. We could maybe read some arguments about why so the shipbuilding advantage says that naval power solves for war. And maybe we read this Panther 25 evidence, which says that naval power doesn't solve war. And that would be an argument we would make on case against the case. And so if you're the 1N, you don't have as pre-prepared of a speech as the 1A, because the 1A very rarely changes before the debate. It's almost always going to be the same exact thing every time. But the 1N, you have a lot of pre-prepared stuff that you do in advance, and you read a lot of that pre-prepared stuff, but ultimately your 1NC is going to change every round depending on what affirmative you're debating, and what strategies you want to go for. And so if you know what affirmatives you might be debating, like if you're debating in DKC and you know you might be debating icebreakers or domain awareness, you'll want to maybe have some 1NCs prepared for icebreakers and domain awareness. If you're not, then you want to be generally prepared with some strategies that you think are going to be generically strong. So the 1N in the debate is in charge of coming up with the disadvantage and the case arguments that the negative team are going to use as their main strategy in the debate. Then the 2NC is one half of what's called the negative block, which is where you extend your arguments throughout the debate. It's like the 2AC in a way, but rather like the 2AC is a direct response to the 1NC, the 2NC isn't always a direct response to the 2AC. You might make arguments that are responsive to the 2AC, but you might not respond to all of the arguments in the 2AC, like the 2A should respond to all of the arguments in the 1NC. Because the negative block is whenever you have the 2NC, which is the second negative constructive, and the first negative rebuttal back to back. And there's a practice that people on the negative will do where they split the block. So say the 2NC only argues the DA, and the 1NR only argues the case arguments, or vice versa. And in those situations, then you're not, like the 2NC isn't responding to the entirety of the 2AC, they're just responding to the case arguments. And the 1NR is only responding to the disad. So that's the only difference, is that the 2NC is basically like a longer speech, but it's split into two and your partner takes half of it, or a little bit less than half, because you have a longer speech than the rebuttal for your constructive. To wrap up this video, we'll go over the rest of the speeches real quickly. I know this is a little hard to visualize. We'll go ahead and create a new document. So we went over the 1AC. This is a pre-written AF case. Says yes to the plan. Sorry for my loud keyboard. The 1NC makes off case and on case arguments against the plan, because if you're on the negative, you say no to the plan. The 2AC extends the 1AC and responds to all 1NC arguments. If you're the 2AC, you respond to all the arguments made in the speech. The 2NC extends and responds to half of the negative arguments. And then the 1NR is right after that. These are the only speeches that are back-to-back by the same team. And then we'll just copy and paste this because it responds to the other half of the negative arguments. One of you does this one and one of you does this one, and you split them based on whatever you want. Typically it's if you read a DA in case maybe multiple dis ads. One partner takes a dis ad and case, and the other partner takes just the dis ad. Then after that, we go back to the affirmative, the 1AR, which has to respond to the 2NC/1NR neg block and extend the AF. You have to extend the AF and respond to all the arguments that they made in the block. That's your job as the 1AR. It's a little bit of a harder speech because you have to respond to, if you're operating on DKC time, this is a 5-minute speech and this is a 3-minute speech, and you have 3 minutes to respond to technically 8 minutes of arguments. So you have to be very efficient. And if you're doing normal policy times, it's 8 minutes and 5. So that's 13 minutes or 5 minutes to respond to 13, which is also pretty rough. So you have to be very efficient. Then the 2NR. So the 1NR obviously already happened. But it happened before the AF had an opportunity to respond, so it feels a little weird. But the 2NR is the last negative speech. It's where you collapse the debate down to the negative arguments that will win the debate and tell the judge why you win. Like, so if you went for, some teams in like the longer format of policy debate will have like 5 off-case arguments, like maybe 2 disadvantages, a counter plan, a critique. Don't worry about any of that stuff. But like, say they had a bunch of different negative arguments they made in the debate. Their goal is to try to develop the best arguments they think they can, and then let the affirmative decide what they end up going for in the 2NR. You read a bunch of arguments you think that are viable in the 1NC. So like, say you're disadvantaged and all the case arguments you like. But then by the 2NR, your decision for what arguments you're focusing on here with your limited time should be, how well did the 1AR respond to the block? We extended everything. They respond to maybe the case arguments super well, but they do a bad job on the disadvantage. Then maybe in the 2NR, you're going to be focusing a lot more on the disadvantage. And the final speech for the affirmative is the 2AR, or the second affirmative rebuttal, which extends the AF and responds to the 2NR and gives their reasons why they win the debate. So yeah, in the 2AR, it's very similar to the 2NR. They've collapsed the debate down to like a few core arguments they think win them the debate, and the 2AR will extend the AF and respond to those arguments and give you their alternative reason why they think the AF still wins the debate. So ultimately, your goal in the affirmative, remember, is to say yes to the plan. You want to prove that passing the plan. So in the case that we went over earlier, icebreakers, doing icebreakers causes more benefits than it does harms. And the negative wants to prove that doing icebreakers would cause more harms than it would cause benefits. And that's the general goal of debates. Hopefully this has made sense. We went over a lot of content because this is kind of the speed run version of the series. If you think you need a more slowed down version of it, I would refer you to the other playlist. But I got a whole lot done here in less than 20 minutes. And hopefully you've got a little bit of an idea on what these debates are supposed to look like, what your responsibilities are, if you're the first affirmative, if you're the first negative, or if you're the second affirmative or the second negative. But yeah, there will probably be another episode of this covering some of the stuff that I didn't really cover here, more specifically on how to speak and things to prioritize and how to think about rounds. But this is all you really need to know for the introduction, getting to know debate part of it. All right, see you next time.